Berlin Pond was thrust into the news in 2012 when the Vermont Supreme Court ruled it's a public lake that all Vermonters have a right to boat and fish on. Almost 4 years later, the waters are a lot calmer, but the pond's scenic setting and fine bass fishing are still worth getting excited about.
Here we go. A jumper. Double.
All right.
That's a smallmouth.
Yep. Even on a sultry summer afternoon, the bass fishing on Berlin Pond can be excellent. Nate Smead, an avid outdoorsman, guided me on what has become one of his favorite local fishing holes. But it wasn't always so. Again, not a big one, but full of spunk. Almost all of the shoreline on Berlin Pond is owned by the city of Montpelier. For decades, it had vigorously enforced a ban on all forms of public use on the 293-acre pond, which supplies Montpelier's state-of-the-art water filtration plant.
My father owns property on the pond, so for years I just looked at this place and it was taunting me because you can only see a certain amount of it from the road, and I used to just dream about what could possibly be going on out here.
Fish. That changed in 2012 when, in response to a lawsuit filed by the city against a couple kayaking on Berlin Pond, the Vermont Supreme Court unanimously ruled Montpelier lacked the authority to regulate a public water body that all Vermonters have a constitutional right to fish and boat on. While the decision riled city officials and some local residents, it was applauded by proponents of greater access to publicly owned resources.
Going back to the earliest days of the state, back to the writing of the Constitution, people of Vermont, the Vermonters who wrote that document and those who followed them, including those who founded my department, realized and appreciated how important it was for the public to have access to public resources, including and especially water.
We're fortunate that, you know, we have a public trust doctrine where we all own this pond together.
Anglers and paddlers immediately began accessing the pond within a town road right-of-way, which raised fears that somehow the pond would be spoiled, even though a previous state rule prohibited the use of gas-powered boat motors and jet skis.
There was a group of people that didn't want to see it open. And the picture that they had painted was that fishermen were going to come here and ruin the bucolic existence. And that really got me charged up because, you know, I'm a fisherman and an outdoorsman, but I also consider myself an environmentalist, and, you know, I care about the outdoors.
That inspired Nate to start Friends of Berlin Pond, a Facebook group that not only supports recreational access to the pond, but is also committed to protecting its natural resources.
People wondered, like I did, what was out here. Everybody thought that there was going to be a state record largemouth bass or a state record perch.
Look at the marks on this fish.
Really green.
I mean, look how nicely marked that is.
I remember the first day that I came out in a kayak, and that was probably the most epic day of bass fishing I've experienced. I lost track, but it was somewhere around 80 bass I caught that day.
This pond was opened up to fishing for the first time in more than a century by the Supreme Court, and the department knew that when you have that unutilized, unused fish resource, changes can happen pretty rapidly. So we immediately started studying the pond more and started putting in place a test waters regulation that limited perch to 10 and that made bass catch and release only.
Despite those safeguards, petitions were submitted to close Berlin Pond to all public uses. But the water quality experts with the State Department of Environmental Conservation determined non-motorized recreation does not pose a threat to Montpelier's drinking water, and that allowing low-impact recreation on the pond is consistent with state policy to provide more opportunities for Vermonters to get outside and enjoy nature. I mean, I know I'm using light tackle, but they just do not give up.
I mean, I don't know if it's just me, but it does seem like the fish in here they're stronger for their size than other places.
I'd say they're stronger for their size than Champlain.
Yeah, to me that's what it seems, and I don't know if it's because we're fishing out of a small boat, but I've always felt like the fish here are very robust.
I would agree with that wholeheartedly.
And the perch are too.
In addition to bass and pickerel, Berlin Pond is also home to a healthy population of yellow perch that includes some real jumbos. Even with the special 10 perch limit, it's a popular ice fishing destination, especially on its larger and deeper southern end. Well, that's not a bad fish.
For the person that's never been here, Berlin Pond sits uphill from Montpelier, about 2 or 3 miles outside of town, and it's really set up as 3 separate ponds. You have the South Bowl, is what I call it, which is the biggest area, and it averages between 50 and 60 feet deep. Now, if you move north from there, you come into what is really like a second pond. There's a narrow, and you come through, and that's a smaller area, but it's about 25 feet deep in the middle. And then if you go all the way to the north, it's the area that people can see from the highway, and it's what most people relate to when they think of Berlin Pond.
So that's a more representative of what Berlin Pond's capable of.
That's a little better. You should be able to catch fish like that anytime you come. And occasionally you'll get one 3 times that size.
With Berlin Pond open to anglers and paddlers, what's needed now is a proper car-top access area that is both pond and user-friendly. At this point, the only access is at a steep, erodible bank at the culvert on Mirror Lake Road, but that's something the state hopes to change soon.
The Fish and Wildlife Department has put in access areas around the state on most of the lakes and ponds in Vermont. And we build those access areas for some very good reasons. Chief among them is just to provide public access to public water and to make that access easier for people who might be older or younger. But another important reason that we build those access areas is to prevent erosion, to prevent unsafe parking situations. We can also educate them there. We have kiosks at most of our access areas, of course, in which we do education about everything from fishing regulations and rules to aquatic nuisance issues. And all those apply to Berlin Pond, where we're going to build the access point next year.
That's a good chunker. I mean, they're just healthy, clean.
Fun fish to catch.
Absolutely.
Catch those all day long.
Absolutely. In addition to some fine bass fishing, Nate and I also enjoyed the pond's scenic beauty and abundant wildlife, which included several flocks of ducks and a pair of loons that fished alongside us. Since it opened to anglers and paddlers, Berlin Pond has remained a largely quiet, undisturbed water where people and wildlife can coexist.
Now it's been several years, and we're out here today, a nice evening, we're alone. Nobody's out here with us. Nothing has really changed. I mean, I look around and everything looks the same as it did the day it opened. So I think a lot of the fears that people initially had, the minority of people that wanted to keep it closed, a lot of those people, those fears are gone, and they realize that, it's okay for the public to be able to come out here and paddle around and enjoy this natural resource that we all own. It's just a great place to come catch some fish and go home with a smile on your face.